Friends, to start our discussion this afternoon, I'd like you to imagine a scene. I'd like you to imagine that you're living 2,000 years ago in a small village in ancient Israel. Now you have a family and you have two small children, and you also look after one of your sick elderly parents. You live in a very simple home and you make a modest living from a flock of sheep and some vegetables that you grow. Well, the land is ruled by the Romans and they're very oppressive and they keep increasing taxes, making it harder for you to make ends meet. You're also oppressed by the religious leaders who are only interested in their own prestige and setting onerous rules on you. Well, despite all of this, you have heard of this prophet called Jesus who promises a better life. So one day you decide with your family to go and see him. Well, you venture out on a week-long journey to go and find this man Jesus, and you see a crowd gathered listening to him and what he has to say. Well, you're fascinated by some of the things he's saying. He's talking about a coming kingdom and better times ahead. Well, as you're there listening to what he has to say, you'll see what's happening in the image, the first image there, if we just go back to the first image. What you see there is people going up to Jesus and he's able to heal ones who have debilitating illnesses and injuries. Then what you decide to do is you decide, well, I'll take my sick elderly parent up to Jesus. And so you're amazed when Jesus is able to cure them of their illness. And so you go back to take your sick elderly parent who's now cured to show the rest of your family. And they're also amazed at what they've seen. Well, you continue to listen for a little while longer to Jesus. And after a little while, your children start to grumble because they've traveled for many days and they're hungry. And we can see in the next image, before you even have a chance to look for food, amazingly, there's all these baskets of loaves and fishes that have been provided for you and the whole crowd to feed everyone. So what an inspiring experience it would be to be there and see these miracles being performed, seeing the benefit of them on your family. No doubt this would help you to come to believe in this Jesus that you've just seen and what he had to say, and that he understands the problems that you face in life and he has answers and solutions for you. So by hypothetically putting ourselves there in these Bible accounts where miracles are performed, we can see the impact they would have had on the people at the time. Now, unfortunately today, most people think these miracles are just stories and they're made up, and that modern science raises doubts and questions about these miraculous events. Even religious leaders consider them to be just stories and mere myths. There's one quote I'd just like to share with you from one German theologian. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I thought I'd share it anyway. It says, "The burning bush miracle in the Bible at Exodus chapter 3 represented a symbol of Moses' inner struggle with the pricks and burning pangs of conscience, and that the flames could also be seen as flowers that burst into bloom in the sunlight of the divine presence." It was a bit of a mouthful, it made no sense to me, but by simply raising doubts about these miraculous events, does that mean they didn't happen? Well, today in our discussion, we are going to look at some ways that we can build confidence that they actually did happen and how we can benefit by looking into these miraculous events. And we're going to do this in three main points. So firstly, we're going to have a look at what identifies Bible miracles as being accurate. Secondly, we're going to look at what is the purpose of Bible miracles. And thirdly, we're going to have a look at whether we need miracles today to build our faith. So we're going to look at those three areas. Well, turning to the first area, what identifies Bible miracles as being accurate? Now, before we do that, let's just consider what a miracle is. So if you look up a dictionary definition, it'll say something like this. It'll say a miracle is an extraordinary event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws at the time, and so is attributed to a divine source. So if we think about that for a moment, we might consider an example. So we might, for example, today see a jet aircraft flying in the sky, and we would understand what that is. But to people of Bible times, they could potentially see it as an inexplicable event, as per this definition, or a miraculous event. So to people of Bible times, this would make many things we take for granted today as being miracles in their eyes. Just some other examples would include electricity. So today we have electricity, and we have the ability to use electricity to to power the lights in this hall, to power the air conditioning, and our very lives today depend on the harnessing of electrical power for our very survival. So to us today, that seems very normal, but to people of Bible times, that would be considered a miracle. We also have computers. So computers today have allowed the mass scale processing and storing of information across the globe. We can even use the power of computers to have video and voice discussions across the whole world. We get to share videos around the world. We even have our JW Library app and the many videos and ability to access much information through the use of computer power. So again, from our viewpoint, this is not a miracle, as we understand how it works and we have the ability to control it and use it. But to people of Bible times, they would consider these things to be miracles. So thinking about that analogy, we could reason on the same way in relation to Bible miracles. So if humans today can accomplish things that seemed miraculous just a few years ago, then it's also more than possible that the God who created the universe could perform amazing feats that are beyond human understanding at a point in time. To us, they would be considered miracles, but in the Creator or God's eyes, they would be seen as simple acts within his power and control. So now that we've considered what a miracle might involve, let's now consider how we can build confidence that the miraculous accounts in the Bible did happen and what shows their authenticity. So we're going to look at 6 key features together, and that'll help us to build confidence that they did happen. So for our first aspect that we're going to look at, we just want to reflect on the miracles performed by Moses and Aaron in Egypt to secure the freedom of the Israelite nation. And so we'll put the next image up on screen. So as we can see there, these miracles were firstly demonstrated before Pharaoh and all those around him, his servants and priests. And after this, there were miracles performed in front of the whole nation of Egypt. And this included the 10 plagues of Egypt that are well known to people even today. So these miracles were performed in a very public way and affected millions of people. The thought at Exodus 14:25 highlights that the entire nation of Egypt acknowledged that Jehovah was backing this, that Jehovah had performed these miracles and was acting on behalf of his people. So miracles in the Bible, just like these ones in Egypt, were generally performed in a very public and open and transparent way. So that's our first aspect. To see our second aspect, let's open our Bibles to John chapter 11, and we'll read the account there from verse 1. And then this account at John chapter 11 and verse 1 is of the resurrection of Lazarus by Jesus. So John chapter 11 and from verse 1. And it said there, now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Now, if we just go down to verse 4, it says, but when Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness is not meant to end in death, but is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, if we move down to verse 40, and we'll see what happened next. So from verse 40, it said, Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? So they took the stone away. Then Jesus raised his eyes heavenward and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. True, I knew that you always hear me, but I spoke on account of the crowd standing around, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had been dead came out with his feet and hands bound with wrappings, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, free him and let him go. So as we can see in our picture in this account, it was an amazing event, the resurrection of a human being back to life. But what can we take from this account? Well, if we go back to verses 4 and verse 40, it says there that Jesus was pointing to the glory of God So he was pointing to this event bringing glory to Jehovah God. And then if we look at verses 41 and 42, he talks to his father and he says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. True, I know that you always hear me, but I spoke on account of the crowd standing around, so they may also believe that you sent me." So again, he's pointing to his heavenly Father, Jehovah, as being the source of this miracle. So this highlights our second aspect, that Jesus in particular, when performing these miracles, didn't do it for his own prominence or his own prestige or glory. He always brought glory to Jehovah God. So that's our second aspect. Our third aspect is that they were never performed to just mystify people. So again, let's turn our Bibles to find out why that's the case. And let's turn to Matthew chapter 8, and we'll read verses 16 and 17. So Matthew chapter 8 and verses 16 and 17. It says, "But after it became evening, people brought him many demon-possessed ones, and he expelled the spirits with a word, and he cured all who were suffering, in order to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our sicknesses and carried our diseases." So here we can see these miracles show that Jesus wanted to help the people. He wanted to cure their illnesses, and he did this with a view to turning them towards true worship. In particular, this showed that these miracles weren't just performed to mystify people. They weren't performed to put on a show. They were there for a purpose. And Jesus often asked people not to speak of the act he had just performed. So he wasn't there to put on a show and mystify people. And that was a key aspect of Bible miracles. They were performed for a purpose. Our fourth aspect is that miracles were performed with great ease and simplicity. So let's just highlight this point by looking at the account at Mark chapter 4, and we'll read from verse 36. And this is the account of Jesus calming the storm. So Mark chapter 4 and verse 36. So it says this, "So after they had dismissed the crowd, they took him in the boat, just as he was, and there were other boats with him. Now a great violent windstorm broke out, and the waves kept crashing into the boat, so that the boat was close to being swamped. But he was in the stern, sleeping on the pillow. So they woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are about to perish?' With that he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Hush, be quiet.' And the wind abated and a great calm set in." So these storms, as you can see in our picture, were quite common on the Sea of Galilee. And the Greek expression there for this storm refers to a great hurricane of wind. So it was quite a violent storm that we're talking about here. And yet, how was this miracle performed? Well, if we go back to verse 39, it tells us, Jesus said, "Hush, be quiet," and the storm ended. So this miracle, like many other miracles, were performed with great ease and with great simplicity. And Jesus was able to control the physical elements very easily. So that's our fourth aspect. Our fifth aspect is that Bible miracles were not limited to just believers with existing faith. So to prove this point, let's have a look at Matthew chapter 9, and we'll read from verse 35. So Matthew chapter 9 and 35. And it says there, "And Jesus set out on a tour of all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news of the kingdom and curing every sort of disease and every sort of infirmity. On seeing the crowds, he felt pity for them because they were skinned and thrown about like sheep without a shepherd." So here we can see that Jesus was curing all the people. He was teaching and preaching, as it mentions there in verse 35. So this reference to teaching and preaching would mean that he was instructing and explaining kingdom truths and who he was to the people who were not just believers, but also those who didn't currently believe. So the combination of these miracles being performed and Jesus teaching the people helped many to come to put faith in him and the message he was sharing. Well, our final aspect that we're going to, that gives us evidence that Bible miracles are reasonable to believe in, is that they were always confirmed by eyewitnesses. So to show this account is we can look at the resurrection of Jesus, because this was an event at which even at first his disciples didn't believe in. But if we turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 3, we'll see how many eyewitnesses there were to this account. So 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and from verse 3. It says, "Therefore among the first things I handed on to you was what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried. Yes, that he was raised up on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still with us, though some have fallen asleep in death. After that he appeared to James and to all the apostles, but last of all he appeared also to me as if to one born prematurely." So by the time Jesus had ascended to heaven, there were more than, as it mentions there, 500 eyewitnesses who had seen him alive, and then, as we can see in this account, had seen him ascend to heaven. So again, this highlights how there was eyewitnesses to all of these miraculous accounts in the Bible. So if we just summarize now and consider the 6 elements we've just considered, just so we can recall them. So the first one was that Bible miracles occurred in a very public way in front of people. Secondly, we saw they were never performed for self-prominence. Thirdly, they were never performed just to mystify people. Fourthly, they were performed with great ease and simplicity. Fifthly, they were not just limited to those who already believed. And finally, we saw that they were confirmed by eyewitnesses. So we can see from this that whilst many may challenge these miraculous accounts are true, we can see it's quite reasonable to believe in them and reasonable to believe that they're accurately recorded. Despite being beyond human understanding, particularly at the time, they were all well within the realms of Jehovah and both Jesus' power to perform these things. And we can see from those points that we've considered that they have the hallmarks of being reliable historical events. So if we can confirm that it's reasonable to believe in Bible miracles, we could then ask, what did they demonstrate to the people who were there to see them? Well, let's now consider a few important reasons for why these Bible miracles happened. So if we go back for a moment and think about the 10 plagues of Egypt and the miracles performed in front of the Egyptians, what did we learn from that account? Well, the account in Exodus talks about it. After seeing these miracles, the Egyptian nation had to acknowledge that they were performed with the backing of Jehovah God. We can also see this in relation to the miracles performed by Jesus. If you open your Bibles, let's have a look at the account at John chapter 9, and let's read from verse 31, and this brings out the same point. So John chapter 9 and verse 31. So there it says, "We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he listens to this one. From of old it has never been heard that anyone opened the eyes of one born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing at all." So here, just as in the case of the miracles performed in front of the Egyptians, they identified that they were performed with the backing of Jehovah God. So really this was a clear demonstration of Jehovah's backing and his universal sovereignty over all other gods. Now, if we also reflect back on that opening example we used of that Israelite family who saw the miracles performed by Jesus, we just want to ask a few questions, and this will bring out some other reasons for Bible miracles. The first one is, we could ask, after seeing these miracles, what would these ones feel about Jesus' identity? Well, let's find out by looking at John chapter 6 and verse 14. So if we open to John chapter 6 and verse 14, it tells us there. It says, "When the people saw the sign he performed, they began to say, 'This really is the prophet who was come into the world.'" So these Bible miracles also help to identify Jesus as the promised Messiah. As it mentions there, he was the prophet who was to come into the world. They were expecting this Messiah to come. So by seeing these Bible miracles and Jesus performing them, that helped to show that these prophecies were being fulfilled and that he was the Messiah. Well, this family, if they, we could also ask if they were there and they saw Jesus cure one of their sick elderly family members, what would they think about that? Well, no doubt they would feel that Jesus cared about them. They would feel that Jehovah God cared about them. He actually had interest in their well-being. Imagine if you had been cured of a debilitating illness. How would you feel about the person who helped you? Jesus here was showing that his Father had given him the power and the authority over sin and death, but also really wanted to help people. He cared about them. And so that's the same for us as well. We know we have the hope in the near future that all our sicknesses and illnesses and disabilities will soon be removed. And that shows that both Jesus and his Father have an interest in mankind and want the best for us. Again, thinking about that hypothetical Israelite family, what would be their response to seeing these miracles performed? What do you think their response would have been? Well, no doubt they, like many others, would have come to put faith in Jesus and convert to Christianity. So the performance of these miracles backed up the message Jesus was sharing at the time regarding the kingdom and that what he had in store for mankind. They demonstrated Jehovah was backing these miracles, but also that he was backing the kingdom message. And this helped to lead to many coming into Christianity and to the establishment of many congregations at the time. And so many thousands came to believe with the benefit of these miracles and also the message from Jesus. And if we think for a moment, at the time, there were only very few wealthy ones who had access to even the Hebrew scrolls. So most people wouldn't have had access to be able to just read these scrolls on their own. And in fact, in some lands, there was no knowledge of the Bible at all. And so really the miracles being performed and hearing about these miracles along with the kingdom message really helped ones at the time to come to believe. So now that we've considered it's reasonable to believe in Bible miracles, what is the reason for these Bible miracles? We could ask, well, why don't we have miracles today? What can we look to today to help to give us confidence in the kingdom hope that we have? Well, to find out why miracles are not a feature of modern day Christianity, let's use the Bible again and turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we'll read from verse 8 there. So 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 8. It says there, love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away with. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away with. For we have partial knowledge and we prophesy partially. But when what is complete comes, what is partial will be done away with. So having accomplished their purpose, these Bible miracles are no longer needed in our time. As it mentions there, these things would be done away with because they had an important role and purpose at the time, but they're no longer needed in our time. And the reason for that is that we have much more that we can build our faith on today. As it mentions there, they only had partial knowledge, whereas today we have much more we can look to help us build our faith. And that is an important thing we need to keep in mind, is that we have many modern day miraculous things as servants of Jehovah that can help us in this regard. And so miracles are no longer needed. Well, to help us in this aspect, let's just consider for a few moments what are some of these miraculous modern day things that we have that can help us to build our faith. And we're just going to consider 5 together. Well, the first one is one that we no doubt can all guess. We have the Bible itself. So we have the full and complete scriptures today that we can look to. And the early Christians that we considered earlier only had limited copies of the Hebrew scrolls. And so unlike them, we have a great advantage in having the whole Bible available to us. We know that it's been estimated there's more than 5 billion copies of the Bible that have been printed and distributed across the earth. And that doesn't factor in the copies that we have on our handheld devices. We know also the Bible is available in thousands of languages in part or whole. And so really this is a demonstration of Jehovah God's intent for it to be available to all mankind. So really that's a modern day miraculous thing that we have that we can look to. Well, another aspect is that we have the physical creation. So as Romans 1 verse 20 says, it is inexcusable for man to deny the existence of God when we look at the physical creation around us. So really, if we look at the world around us, and we have far greater knowledge of the universe and the physical creation than those of Bible times, we can look to this, and this can help to strengthen our faith in a creator and confirm our belief in that he exists and he wants the best for us. The third aspect that we can look to today is that we have true Christianity. So we have true Christianity that's looked into the Bible and been able to explain the key messages of the Bible, which relates to Jehovah's universal sovereignty and the coming of his kingdom. We know that through this true Christianity, there's a global preaching work being done by all the members of Jehovah's people today. So really this helps to build our faith and confidence, and is really a miraculous gathering of true Christians all around the world. And it really shows that Jehovah does have a purpose for mankind, and he does want to gather people from the earth today. The fourth aspect that's linked to that is that we have an abundance of spiritual food available in hundreds of languages that can help us to look into God's word, the Bible, and understand it. We have billions of magazines, books, and other publications in hundreds of languages that really can help us to build our knowledge and faith. And finally, what's our fifth one? Well, we have numerous Bible prophecies that point to events happening in our time and events happening since the first century that really point to the time we're living in as being a critical time in human history. And so by looking into the Bible and considering these prophecies, it can help to build our confidence in the coming kingdom and what the Bible's message is today. So really, given we have all these modern day miraculous miracles that we have access to, that were not available to those in Bible times, we can see how we have much to help us build our faith and confidence in the coming kingdom. So just in closing, how can we benefit from learning about these miraculous Bible accounts that we've considered today? Well, the Bible itself tells us at Romans 15 verse 4, it highlights that the scriptures were written for our instruction so that we might have hope. So we have a hope on the basis of looking into these accounts. And really, it's only through a study of the Bible and all these miraculous accounts that we can come to build confidence in the coming kingdom and the hope that we have. And as we mentioned earlier, we don't just have the Bible, but we have an abundance of spiritual food that helps to explain the message in the Bible. And so that's a great blessing that we can share in. These miraculous accounts also give us confidence that Jehovah cares about us and his Son care about us. They want the best for us. They want to be able to cure all our ailments and problems that we face today. And so that really shows they both care for mankind and want better conditions for us in the near future. But just in closing our discussion, let's just read a brief scripture that highlights the greatest miracle that is still yet to come. And that's taken from 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 13. So 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 13. It says there, but there are new heavens and a new earth that we are awaiting according to his promise, and in these righteousness is to dwell. So aren't we looking forward to this coming new world, a new world that we can look forward to as a part of this kingdom? No doubt we all are. It's really an amazing thought, isn't it, that millions now living will be a part of this new coming arrangement on the earth and will live in much better conditions. And this will be a truly amazing miraculous event that will really provide the final evidence that the miracles that are recorded for us in the Bible did actually take place.
Hi dear listeners. Did you know you can see the live version also? Check out the link below.